What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Chris, man. We are here at the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast. It is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. My name is Chris Drummond. I am a sports journalist based out of Minnesota, freelance sports journalist, casino host, also host of this Work Hard, Play Harder podcast, where I'm bringing individuals on to talk about their why into the profession and who they are outside of their occupation. We've got a special guest coming on today. Her name is Gabby Hurlbut. She is based out of Unionville, Connecticut. She is the host for the Locked On podcast for the Red Sox. She has a podcast of her own called Boston Ballin' that we'll get into. She's worked for ESPN. She's been a production assistant. She's been an intern. So she has definitely had some experience in this field. So we're going to talk to her about her why, get to know her a little bit, and break bread with her. So without any further ado, I introduce to you the wonderful, the beautiful, the talented Gabby Hurlbut. Hey, Gabby, how we doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just want to say thank you for hopping on my podcast. Work hard, play harder, and also, how is your week going so far?
Good. It's going well. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to a nice long weekend um coming up here. I'm just hoping for some nice weather.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I can't really complain right now because it is absolutely beautiful out here in Minnesota. It's not many clouds in the sky. We did get the rain a couple days ago, but I think the rain has went away. So,
Yeah, it's
cross.
raining here today, so I'm just sitting here like, oh, like can we get nicer weather?
Okay, well, I'm hoping that it push away for this Memorial Day weekend coming up for you for sure. Um, Before I start peppering you with all these questions, let me reiterate why I wanted to bring you on. You're a fellow podcaster as well. I believe you have a podcast called Boston Ballin', if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You're also a host for the Locked On Red Sox podcast as well. You've worked with ESPN before. I'm a journalist that is a sports journalist. I love talking to other people and getting to know their why they got involved with sports and media. And that's something that I definitely wanted to do with you. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts as well. Very entertaining stuff. Obviously, Boston is something that's very important to you, Boston sports. Anybody that knows when you tweet all about Boston sports. And obviously, we're going to get into a little bit of that talking about game two tonight, which is the Celtics and the Pacers. So we'll get into a little bit of that. But we want to know your background, and I want to break bread with you and get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'm definitely excited to be on here with you.
No doubt. So, Gabby, as I always do with my first question, it is, what is your why? What is your why of getting into sports media? What is your why of doing podcasting? Was there somebody that you looked up to? Did you just accidentally fall into it? Explain to me what your story is.
Yeah, so for me, sports have just always been something that I've been passionate about ever since I was young and grew up really close to the Yukon campus. So my dad and my grandfather kind of instilled Yukon basketball and football into me at a very young age. My grandfather growing up always had season tickets to Yukon basketball and football. So that was kind of my first like open entrance into the sports world and being a sports fan, and then fell in love with Boston Red Sox players like David Ortiz, Pedro Martinez, legendary players that played in Boston. Nomar Garciaparra was my first Red Sox jersey. So I fell in love with the Red Sox, and it led to me watching other Boston teams, and then I just fell in love with all the Boston teams. So since I grew up in Connecticut, I grew up on that side of the state, so I was so close to Boston, so I would be going into Boston a lot for games. So I knew as I got a little bit older that being in sports was something that I knew would make me feel fulfilled. And I've seen people complain about their jobs or just not really like what they're doing. And when I was in high school was when I had a moment with myself that said I want to do something with my life that makes me feel happy and makes me feel like it's not as much like work and something I would be doing anyway. So then I went to college at Ithaca College, got a degree in sports media. knowing that that's what I wanted to do. And then was lucky enough when I graduated from college to land a job at ESPN. I was applying all over the place. I was originally actually looking to not live in Connecticut since I had grown up there. So I was looking at other places. I had done an internship in LA when I was in college, and that was a place that I really was looking to live. But then I got a job offer with ESPN, which their headquarters is in Connecticut. And so
Sure.
I
Yep.
said, I would be dumb not to take this job because if I want to work in sports, ESPN is the place for me to go if I want to kind of make a name for myself in the sports field. So then I started working there. I was doing social media production, things like that, helping with some production of some of their shows. And I loved the job, loved the people there, and got a great experience as my
Sure.
entrance into sports. And then at the end of 2020, during COVID, I found out that I was going to be part of a big mass COVID layoff.
Right.
Um, the company laid off like 500 people or so. So I was part of that. A good portion of my department was part of that, unfortunately.
Right.
So around that same time that I found out about the layoff, somebody contacted me about coming on a podcast to talk about my experience in sports and how I landed at ESPN and all that. So I was a guest on his podcast. And then after that, I said, wow, this sounds like really fun. Like, this was cool. I enjoyed doing it. Like, I would love to do that myself. And I knew that I could talk about Boston sports all day, every day. So I thought, what better way to utilize that skill and be able to talk about something that I'm passionate about than to start a podcast on it. So then I started Boston Balling in December of 2020. That's crazy how long ago that was at this point.
Almost 4 years.
Because it's shown like it's just really been such a good experience for me, and it's just grown tremendously in that time. I've been able to get some really good guests on Boston Balling and basically covering all the Boston sports teams, which is obviously something that I love. So then continued to grow Boston Balling, was, focusing on that and continuing to grow my own brand. And then last year, almost to the day, like middle of June of last year, the two people that were hosting Locked On Red Sox for the Locked On Network were leaving, and they were looking for somebody to take over that show. And I had known about Locked On for a while and their shows. So I reached out to them about the opportunities. They actually had somebody had mentioned me to them and recommended me for taking over that
Oh,
show,
nice.
which is interesting. And I was kind of wondering how that happened, but it was cool for me because somebody obviously really liked what I did. So they recommended me. Then I went through the interview process, and then they hired me essentially to be their new Red Sox host. So, and I've been doing that since then too. So that's a Monday through Friday show. So it's a lot of episodes and it's a lot of work, but it's super fulfilling because baseball was my first real, love interest when it came to sports and the Boston teams and falling in love with the Boston Red Sox. And so I landed that position, and I knew that all of the work I had put into starting Boston Balling generated in me landing this bigger opportunity because Locked On is such a big podcast network with a big audience. And for me, I felt like it had helped me to reach one of my goals, which was to go even bigger and open up more doors from Boston Balling. And now I have this daily Red Sox podcast that I love doing. And I've gotten to connect with so many more Boston fans who are passionate
Sure.
about their teams like I am. And I've gotten to
Yes.
talk to former players and people in the media who cover the team. And it's just been an awesome experience for me to be able to do that as well.
I love it. I love it. That's an awesome answer. And look, I truthfully love talking to sports fans. I love talking to sports podcasters. I grew up in California. So obviously, as you know, California and Boston have such a rivalry when it comes to sport. No question about it. However, I do. Two of my favorite players is Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, who are two obviously Celtics legends now in the lore. Boston Red Sox, which we'll get into some memories. One of my favorite memories was the Johnny Damon Grand Slam back in '04 in
Yes.
Game 7. He was one of my favorite players. It just killed all hopes and dreams of a Yankee win in that stadium. So to do it there and to break the curse there after the season that they had previously in '03, if anybody who watches this knows the Boston Sox history, Aaron Boone had a walk-off home run in Game 7 of '03. For them in '04 to come back and win it and beat the Yankees how they did, being down '03, that was just my favorite Boston Red Sox memory ever, for sure.
Oh yeah, that whole season was just so special, and just that postseason run, just a bunch of guys who just were hungry to win. And there were a
Yeah,
lot of special guys in that locker room. I mean, David Ortiz being, leading the charge that season and the postseason that he had, and just how many big home runs he hit to help the Red
right,
Sox that year, and just, a bunch of players who just now are Red Sox legends. I mean, Pedro was one of the best pitchers to ever pitch. And he,
right.
'04 wasn't even one of his best years, but he
It
still
was
got the
not.
job done in the playoffs. And that whole run, there's just so much to look back on and think this is so cool, because the Red Sox are still to this day the only baseball team that's come back from down 3-0.
Right. It's one of my best 30 for 30s that I've watched. And I know you probably know the ESPN 30 for 30 films pretty well, but that's one of my best ones that I've seen a director do, highlight, right? And you talked about some of the big names before I get into the next question. You talked about some of the big names like Ortiz and Nomar and maybe Manny and Pedro. But, Dave Roberts was on that team. Jason Varitek was on that team, which is also, we talked about Johnny Damon on that team as well. They had a squad. They had a squad on that team that was pretty good, and that was a special year. It was almost destined for them to break the curse, as they called it and talked about it. So it's just one of my favorite memories. Seeing that home run go, I was like, oh boy, they might do this. It'd be the first team to ever do it, for sure.
Yeah, and I think once they got over that hump, once they won that first game, against the Yankees after being down 3-0, that it's
Sure.
like, okay, like they're giving me excitement right now, but like they were down 3-0, like they're not going to win 4 games in a row. And then when
Right,
they
right,
did, it's like every game that passed and they won again, I was like, okay, what, like this team might actually do it. Like the more games they were winning, the more I was like feeling confident that they might
right.
actually do it. Then they won game 7, and that's what I knew they were winning the World Series. I was like, this team just
Absolutely.
came back from being down 3-0, like nobody's stopping them at this point. And then they go and just like they just go and win 4 straight in the World Series. And it's like, yeah, nobody was stopping that team after that.
And it was crazy because some of those games they were down to the very last out. They could have
Yeah.
been eliminated, right? They did not have the lead, but Ortiz big hits. I remember Roberts and I think the steal that he had in second.
Yep. That was a legendary steal to this day.
Right. So I'm just such a huge historian of the game, as you probably are with sports as well. So I love that. This next question has to do with Ithaca College.
Mm.
That's a college you went to. You went and graduated from. Were there any other schools that could have persuaded you from going to Ithaca College?
Yeah, so I was looking at other schools too, primarily schools that had good media programs. I was also looking at Syracuse too, which was pretty close to Ithaca, and they
Yep.
had a good media program as well, and they were location-wise close enough, so I did them on the same visit. So I just did one, week where I just took a couple days off from school and looked at both schools at the same time. So that was pretty convenient. But I at first thought I wanted to go to Syracuse. It was a big sports school, so I wanted to go to a school like that where I could go to the games and be in that type of environment. I hated Syracuse sports because I was a UConn fan, but I was like, I want to go to a school that has a cool sports environment. So looked at that one and then went back a second time to look at both schools again because I was still torn between those two schools. And then
Mhm.
something about the second visit made me want Ithaca. And I don't know what it was that actually fully changed my mind, but I think it was something having to do with the fact that it felt like a closer knit community at Ithaca, and the class sizes were a little bit smaller, and a lot of the connections that they had in the industry to help lead me to job opportunities after I graduated. So after I visited both schools a second time, I finished those visits and I said, I want to go to Ithaca. And then I got accepted into that school a little while after that. And then I committed there and never looked back after that. And I loved it. It was probably the best decision I've ever made in terms of my career path and where it led me to after school, because I learned so much there. I did quite a few internships while I was there, and I was able to just gain a lot of good experience when I was there.
I love it. On here with Locked On Red Sox host, also Boston Ballin podcaster Gabby Hurlbut on the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast. I love that answer. I really do. My dad lives in upstate New York near Syracuse. He's probably about 45 minutes away. So I've been used to going to the Carrier Domes for the past few years and being able to watch some good sports there. I love basketball. I'm not a huge Syracuse fan, but going to that Carrier Dome is very special. One of my bucket list items, Gabby, is going to a UConn game, men's and women's. I've never been to stores. I've never been to Connecticut, period, which is one of my questions for you at the end of it, because I need some good recommendations and,
Okay.
be able to go up there for sure. I got some favorite questions here for you, Gabby, and I want to ask them, and you give me the 411 on these questions that I asked. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Favorite meal you like to cook?
Steak and potatoes, baked potatoes with melted cheese and sour cream.
Oh, wow. That sounds delicious. Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness.
I
Okay.
love myself a good steak.
Now, what kind of steak you talking about? Ribeye, sirloin, porterhouse?
Depends on what I'm feeling, but I do like sirloins. That's usually my favorite.
Okay, I'm with you on that. Totally. All right, here we go. Favorite concert you've ever attended?
Oof. That one's tough. I've been to a lot of concerts. Uh, I would say my favorite one that I've ever been to was probably the Jonas Brothers Reboot reunion concert that I went to a few years ago, because these guys sang, like, all of their throwback songs from the past, and they sang a bunch of new stuff, and I left that concert saying I wanna go again, and I texted my sister who lived in Boston at the time, and I said, "So their concert is gonna be in Boston in a couple nights, like, I just saw it in Connecticut, and I wanna go again, like, would you go with me?" And I, like, absolutely loved it, and then I even went so far as to watch the whole thing again on YouTube after the fact too, because I just loved the concert.
Okay, Jonas
Because they
Brothers,
went on
definitely,
that reunion concert or whatever when they got back together.
which was great. I'm glad they did. I know it was probably therapeutic because they was going through some things in their personal lives at that time for sure. One of my favorite songs of theirs is "Strong Enough." If you
Oh,
know
yeah,
what
yeah.
that song,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's a
one of
good
my
song.
favorite. Absolutely. So I love that. Okay, favorite place you've ever traveled to?
I've traveled to some really awesome places before, and I think it depends on really what type of experience you like when you're traveling. So for me, I personally loved going to Hawaii. I went there a couple times. My uncle lived there for a little bit, so I was able to go see him a couple times, and just experiencing everything that that place had to offer was super cool for me. Like, the beaches were awesome. Like, I did a surf lesson, I went to a luau, I did all of these typical Hawaii types of things, and I came back from that, and then I wanted to go again, so I went back a second time and I visited him again. But I like those island types of vacations. Like, I went to Aruba as well relatively recently and loved that as well. So that's another place that I want to go back to also. So a lot of tropical types of places that I visited, I'd say, are my favorite.
Absolutely. For me, it's definitely Cabo San Lucas. That's probably one of my favorite places I've been to in Mexico. I've also went to Hawaii. That was a family trip, so that was pretty cool. And I'm going on a cruise this October. It'll be my first cruise that I've ever went on. So
Yeah, I've never
I've
been
never,
on one.
yeah, this is definitely my first. It's also another family trip. My dad is actually planning it, so I'm like, okay, cool, that's awesome. So I'm very happy and excited to see how the cruise game is. So I'm looking forward to that. This next question has to do with sports. Favorite sport you like to watch on TV? Favorite sport you like to attend in person?
Yeah, so there are definitely different answers for that. I'd say my favorite sport to attend in person is hockey. I think hockey is just such a fun game to watch live. There's just nothing really like the atmosphere at a hockey game, especially at the TD Garden in Boston for Bruins games. There's just really nothing like that atmosphere because even during the regular season, it feels like it's a playoff game. So it's just so cool because you're close to the action at a hockey game too. And I think that's something that helps me to enjoy it is you're close to the action, it's fast paced, so people are staying engaged the entire time during the game. So I think that's why I enjoy watching it in person so much. On TV, I like watching a lot of different sports, but definitely baseball for sure is my number one.
Absolutely. There is nothing like a hockey experience. I know my favorite game that I've ever went to was when I lived in the South. I went to the Nashville Predators game. And their fans down there. I mean, obviously the activity around the arena was pretty damn good too. But their games are great and awesome.
Yeah, I just
Nope.
went to Nashville for the first time in April, and I saw the arena. We walked past it because we were going to a restaurant that was right near there, and having all of that right around the arena is a cool experience for sure.
Did you get a chance to ride the bus? You know where they're drinking on the bus and when did you see the bus where they were driving the bus and they were pedaling? Did you
Oh
see
yeah,
that?
we didn't do that, but I saw people that were like we those would pass us on the way, and I was like, that looks like a really good time, actually.
Absolutely. My favorite bar is Tootsie's.
Yeah, we went there.
You went
Yeah,
there, okay? Okay, got you. So you already
yeah,
know what
we
time
went
it
to
is.
Tootsie's. That place was fun for sure.
Absolutely. So my last of the favorite is favorite restaurant to go to in Connecticut.
Pepe's Pizza for sure.
Okay, so hold on. So when people say pizza, I love to like follow it up with a question of are you a deep dish person? Are you a meat lovers person? Or are you one of those that has to get like all the vegetables on
No, definitely meat. Like usually I'll get like meatballs with something or just like some or chicken even like I love buffalo chicken pizza. So I'm that type of person who will get like my favorite like ideal pizza would be like buffalo chicken with cheese, onions, peppers, that's it. That would be like my ideal. But I also am somebody who likes pineapple on pizza. So I like Hawaiian pizza as well, which seems to cause a lot of controversy with people, but I am a pineapple on pizza person.
You know, no judgment here. I'm not super into pineapples on pizza, although I do like pineapples very much. But I'm more of a meat lovers. Give me the pepperoni. Give me like the sausages. Give me. To be honest with you, I never had buffalo chicken pizza. I never had chicken on pizza,
Oh,
but
wow. It's
yeah,
so good.
I never had it. Yeah, people tell me that, and I'm like, okay, but I've never tried it. I will eventually step out of my comfort zone on that and try it. I'm a deep dish kind of guy though, because my mother and father are from Chicago. Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
that's the land of the deep dish. That's where they were
Yep.
born and raised. So I'm very used to deep dish pizza. So I
I've
always
never
like,
had it. I've never had deep
really?
dish. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, see, that's something you got to try. See, the next time we talk, you got deep dish. I'll try buffalo chicken, and we'll converse, and we'll tell
Yeah,
each
right? Break down our thoughts on each. Yeah, that's something I will say about Connecticut is Connecticut has very good pizza.
other. Okay, I'm with that. I love that. I want to talk to you about your day to day. Right when you get up in the morning, what the hell does Gabby do in the morning to get ready for her shows, podcasts? Well, talk about your different podcasts and what you talk about. Maybe you have people on you. Maybe you co-host it. I'm not sure. Maybe you do it solo or just bring guests on. But talk to me about what is a process of your typical day? Because I know every day is not the same.
No, and so I do host by myself. So basically, it is a lot of coming up with my own content and figuring out, what might the audience want to hear about today. And especially with Locked On Red Sox, like that's such a specialized show. And that was something I had to get used to when I started with them because with Boston Balling, I could talk about whatever the biggest news in Boston sports was at the time. Now,
Mhm.
for Locked On Red Sox, like I take all of that out. And that's why I still do Boston balling because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the other Boston team still. But with Locked On, I'm like, okay, what is the biggest Red Sox news that's going on today? Maybe if there was a game the night before, a lot of times I'll go back and rewatch some of the highlights from that game. Like, even though I usually always watch the games and then talk about it on the show, maybe I'll, go back and kind of watch certain aspects of the game that I want to see again, or talk about, somebody that got more than one hit in the game and what that means for the rest of their season. Like, if we could
Sure.
look forward to it or if it's just a fluke. And then I'll create storylines that way based on, a season somebody is putting together. And the more that I've done it, the more I've learned what names kind of draw more clicks than others. So if I put, somebody like Rafael Devers, if his picture and name is attached to the episodes, more people are going to click on it because he is the face of the franchise right now. So
Right.
whenever there's an opportunity for me to incorporate him into a show, then I'll do it. So I'm constantly thinking about different storylines and things that make sense to talk about at the time. And then before I record, I'm sitting there rewatching everything I need to rewatch. I'm creating different show topics and starting to build out a plan. But the lockdown episodes are only 30 minutes. So I have to really manage the time in terms of what I'm
Right.
talking about when. And sometimes that feels like a long time because when you're talking by yourself for that long, sometimes it can feel longer than you would like it to. So I have to come up with enough content to where if I run out of time, then that's a good problem for me to have, because then I have more topics that I can talk about the next time, as opposed to being 20 minutes in and not having enough content to fill the rest of the show with. So
Sure.
I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, what ads I have to read that day, because Lockdown has their sponsors that we have to promote on the show. So I get schedules for that every day. So I'm looking at what those are and what I have to read and familiarizing myself with scripts of whose ads I'm reading that day on the show. And then going through and figuring out, would this make more sense for me to talk about tomorrow? Or if they have an off day and there's not really a game to break down because they hadn't played that day, um, then I think about, like, okay, maybe somebody's injured, but they are going to be coming back soon. So I want to do a preview on what the season could look like for somebody who's coming back from the injured list or something like that. So you have to kind
Absolutely.
of be really creative with the topics. And then there's post production involved because I have to go through and edit things after I finish recording and do all the uploading process. And that sometimes can take a while too. And then I do plan out guests sometimes too, like if I want to have guests on. So, for example, right now I'm in the middle of doing a 10 episode series that's remembering that 2004 Boston Red Sox team,
Sure.
actually, because it's like the 20-year anniversary this year of when that
Yep.
happened. So, every Thursday for the next 10 weeks, dropping an episode that has to do with the 2004 team. So, I've been exchanging messages with some players that were on that team that are going to come on and talk to me about just the vibes in the clubhouse that year, how they actually did it, and what their experience was like being on that team. So I'm working on planning that into the schedule. So you constantly have to kind of know what the biggest things are. And the frustrating thing can be I might have my whole episode done and ready to go,
Right.
and then big news breaks after that. And then
Right.
I'm finding myself having to redo segments or like re-record something so that I can fit that in there so people aren't listening to the next episode and being like, why didn't she acknowledge, like, that so and so just got hurt and
Did
is
this.
going to be out for
Right.
a month. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
there's definitely, you have to stay on your feet with that. And then I think about my Boston Balling podcast and like the fact that, the Celtics are in the playoffs right now. So that's the team on Boston Balling right now that people are going to want to hear the most about. So I'm looking into bringing Celtics guests on, maybe people who cover the Celtics for their job, just to talk about the playoff run. And then, as it gets closer to football season, maybe I bring on a Patriots reporter or something like that to preview their season. So it's a lot of content to think about, but it's something I just like love to do. And interacting with people on Twitter definitely helps to know kind of what people are interested in hearing about at the time.
Oh yeah, you get the pulse of the people, right? Because that's that. Without them listening to your shows or listening to what you have to say, you don't really have much of a show. That's why I
You
love
do.
asking. That's why I love asking this question, because people do, and I really didn't even think about that. When you do a podcast by yourself and you have a time limit, that can be a little bit nerve wracking. Where you're like, okay, what if I run out of information to talk about? Like, what if I talk about something and then all of a sudden something happens? I really didn't even consider that, and I'm glad that you said that because you are right. When you're on a time frame, you got to have enough content to talk about because the last thing you want is dead air when you're
Yeah.
talking podcast for sure. Absolutely, I totally
Yeah,
agree with
because
that.
you don't want to be like over talking about things just to like waste time. You don't want to sit there and be like, "Oh, I have 5 more minutes left, so I'm just going to continue talking about this," and then you find yourself repeating a lot of different things you already talked about because then people are like, "I feel like I'm listening to what I listened to 10 minutes ago." You know what I mean? So then
Absolutely,
it's you have to kind
absolutely.
of make sure that you have enough variation in the topics. But the nice thing for me is I don't do the show live. So if I
Right.
mess something up or I misspeak or something updates, like a stat or something updates after I already say it, then I can go back and edit that out and I can like re-record that little section. So that's why I like that I don't do that live. Boston Balling, I usually always do live. I usually bring the guest on with me and I do a live stream of it on Facebook and Instagram. And then after the live stream's over, then I download it and I upload it to all these other platforms. So I can't really edit anything out when I do Boston Balling, but I also don't get paid to do Boston Balling. It's my own show. So if I mess something up, I'm like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. But like with Lockdown, I need to make sure that everything is like going smoothly and according to kind of how they want it to be. So it's when I first started doing it, those first few episodes, I was terrified. I remember because I was like, I don't know if I can really do this because Boston Balling, I had always had a guest with me. Like I would bring guests on every week that I recorded the show. With
Sure.
Locked On, that's when I first really started doing a show fully by myself. And when I bring guests on Locked On now, it's nice because I have somebody else to talk to as opposed to feeling like I'm just talking to myself the whole time. So
Absolutely.
that's nice. But there was an adjustment period for sure of figuring out how to do the show on my own. And I know I've had people who listen to it that say, like, I really enjoy listening to your show because you make it feel like it's conversational, even though it's just you talking. Like you make me feel like I want to jump in on the conversation. And that's definitely the goal that I
Absolutely.
try to have. Like make it feel like I'm still talking to somebody who's sitting across from me, even though they're not actually there.
Absolutely. I mean, talking to you for these 10 minutes that I've talked to you, it does feel conversational, which is exactly what I want my podcast to be. It's very easy to talk to somebody like you. No question. It brings me to a great point though, which is mental health, right? We talked about the layoff of ESPN, right? That's always a tough thing to do. When you get laid off, you never know what your next move is going to be, but it was a blessing that someone gave you a call, right? But in this industry, you hear a lot of things called overworked, underpaid, burnout. You hear that, especially as a journalist. I've heard that from other journalists as well. Tell me, how do you keep your mental health stable? Being in this sports industry, because sports are nights and weekends. They're very odd times of the day. It's not business hours times. And you have family, friends, loved ones, maybe a significant other. How do you balance your work life balance, but also maintain good mental health and still do the best job you possibly can?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I definitely went through a tough period when I was working at ESPN because I was working night shifts. My hours were 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 3 a.m., kind of covering though that shift because that's when sports are, and so it's that it kind of had to be that way. And so I remember because I was always working nights, I was always working weekends, and I remember my friends would get together and I just could never go to anything because I was working because I
Right.
would have days off during the week. Like I'd be off like Tuesday and Wednesday and then I'd work the rest of the days, or I'd be off like, Monday and Tuesday, like random weekdays, so that when I'm off, everybody else is working and vice versa. Like I'd
Right.
be working at night and on the weekends when they're all available. So I remember it got kind of depressing for me during that time because I just wasn't seeing anybody. And mental health wise, I felt like I wasn't able to do anything else that I enjoyed. Um,
Sure.
and that was really hard because when I was working night shifts, I was off during the day, but what is there to do during the day, during the week, because other people are working? So then after I got laid off, I started to really evaluate kind of what I'm looking for moving forward in terms of job opportunities and things like that. And with where I'm at now, I'm able to build my own schedule so I can manage what I do when, which really has helped me from that standpoint because I am a social butterfly and I like to be out doing things and talking to
Mhm.
people.
I
And
can
it's
tell.
made me feel like a lot better about where I'm at in my life because I definitely make sure that I prioritize seeing people and doing things with people that are close to me. Like, I mean, I'm planning a wedding right now, so that's something that also has to be a priority too right now, and just being able to like get that stuff done so I have certain times of the day that I dedicate to that and seeing family and seeing friends. And since I have more of a flexible schedule now, I can allow myself to do that while still doing what I love. So it really took that experience and kind of living that and seeing that it didn't make me feel as fulfilled because from a work standpoint I liked what I was doing, but I
Right.
wasn't really feeling fulfilled with all the other aspects of my life. So that was something that I really had to go through to kind of change what I was looking for moving forward.
I love that. Congratulations, by the way, on being engaged. That is
Thank
certainly
you.
awesome. I'd love to hear that. But I wanna ask you this because you gave a great answer for that mental health, right? You got to have boundaries. You got to set boundaries for yourself. You know you better than anybody else. If there was somebody, Gabby, that came up to you and said, "Hey, I want to do what you do," right? I love talking sports as well. I love being out and about talking with different guests. What is some advice you would give someone, maybe an intern or a graduate or somebody who may be a little older, like you and I, that wants to break into this industry?
Yeah, so I've definitely had people reach out to me about this, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter, just people who might be in college right now that are studying it and want to get into the industry, or just other people who have seen what I've done and just want to do it themselves. Like I've had people ask me about starting their own podcast, how do they go about it, or just people who have asked, like, what advice would you give somebody trying to break into sports? And there's definitely a lot that goes into it, and the biggest piece of advice that I would say to give somebody is it's not always gonna be easy, and it's not as glamorous as it seems like it is, like, it's going to make you feel fulfilled if you love sports. Like, me getting paid to watch sports and talk about sports is an absolute dream come true to me,
Absolutely.
but
Yes.
there are definitely sacrifices that you need to be prepared to make if you are in this industry, and it can be competitive, and it's you have to get used to not getting yes all the time from
Mm,
everybody. You have to be more open to hearing no and being willing to adapt to that and keep moving forward because you can't let those types of things discourage you from continuing. It's just the right opportunity is elsewhere and not there. And it's really easy for people to get discouraged by that. But I've learned through so many experiences that it's not always going to be the first job that you apply for that's going to be the right one. You have to keep trying and you have to keep going and keep having confidence in yourself and the skills that you can provide. And you have to be open to trying new things because there are so many different types of roles that you can do in the sports industry. You just have to keep yourself open minded and build connections along the way. And that's what's going to get you to the place that you want to be. And I think for me too, there were extra learning curves with that because of being a female in the sports industry. And just like knowing going into it that there's just not as many females in the sports industry, and there was definitely a little bit of what I found to be kind of people not really wanting to give me as much credit or listen to what I have to say. And I've had people on Twitter who have said things like that, like,
sure.
you're a female, why would you think you should have an opinion on this? And that's something that you have to just block out because if you get to a point in the industry where you're making a name for yourself, it's impossible to make everybody happy. There's always going to be people who are not happy with you or what you're doing, but you have to remind yourself that you're doing it not for those people and for the people who do support you because those people far outweigh those other people. And so those types of things used to bother me, but it got to a point after a while where it just no longer bothers me anymore, because I'm like, I'm doing this and you're sitting on your couch afraid to like put your face on your Twitter profile and just like saying whatever it is that you can say because you're hiding behind your phone. So you have to definitely not be um you know not be afraid to continue to put yourself out there, even despite the fact that that type of stuff will happen. So it's a hard industry to be in, but it
Sure.
also, when you think about it, it is so rewarding if that's what you love to do and you're so passionate about sports. So it's so worth it at the end of the day. But that's the biggest piece of advice I would give is stay strong through the no's and stay strong through the criticism, because all of that stuff is going to help you be stronger in the professional world down the road.
I love that. I mean, that's my number one advice as well. You speaking the gospel right now, Gabby. That's what it is. Truth be told, that's really, really some real stuff of what you're talking about. Because I don't even cover people on the national stage. I cover high schools and I cover a college, but I give them the same attention that I would cover somebody on a national stage, because it's important. No matter who you cover it, no matter what you're doing, you want to do it with all of your love that you have. And I love this. I envisioned doing this when I was a kid. I used to take stats and sit down and watch Bulls games and Lakers games because my mom and dad, they love the Bulls and they love the Lakers. So I used to always do that. And I dreamed of this one day of being here. And now I do ESPN production. So I go to games and I'm looking at different sideline reporters and doing different games and learning behind the scenes as well as writing and covering sports. So whatever you do, you got to do it with all your love. You can't do it for money. You can't do it for motives. You can't do it for special things like that. You also, like you said, you'll always receive more no's than yeses in this industry. That will
Yes,
never change. You will
100%.
always receive more no's than yeses. But the yeses you do receive are blessings that you need to look at, and you take advantage of your opportunities. You make them organizations and the businesses realize that they made the best decision possible in choosing you. So I
Yep.
love that advice. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think every single person in the industry can relate to what you just said about you're always going to get more no's than yeses. That just is the way of the industry. But you could ask somebody that's the most successful person in the sports media industry in the world, and they'll still say that they received so many no's along the way.
Absolutely, no question. I want to ask you about these 4 different topics before I get into this or that. But I want to ask you about these 4, and these are 4 Boston topics that I literally wrote down that I want your opinion on. So for the New England Patriots, they obviously got a new quarterback in Drake May, got a new head coach in Gerard Mayo. The Patriots, if I'm not mistaken, only won 5 games, maybe a little bit more than that. I might be a little off with that, but I think they only won about 5 games last year. What do you see as a successful season for the New England Patriots? Obviously, with Allen losing both of his starting receivers, the Jets with Aaron Rodgers coming back off an Achilles tear. Miami just got richer with adding OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., to their team. So what do you see as a successful season for the Patriots?
Yeah, this division is tough, and there's a lot of good teams in this division, and the Patriots are very clearly in a rebuilding phase right now. New era of Patriots football. It's certainly going to be weird the first year without Bill Belichick coaching. There's definitely going to be some adjustments that are going to be made there, and people are going to have to get used to this whole new version of Patriots football than what we're used to seeing.
Sure.
I really like Mayo. I think he is going to do a really good job of really seeing this rebuild through, because I think that was something that we lacked with Bill. Was I don't think he was ever fully committed to actually seeing a rebuild through, because he's nearing the end of his career now. He just wants to rack up wins and retire as the winningest head coach in football history. So I mean,
Sure.
that's fine.
Sure.
Like, it makes sense because of where he's at now. But I just think it was time to move on from him, from the standpoint of, if the Patriots really want to commit to this rebuild and do it the right way, they had to start from scratch. And that started with the coaching for sure. So I think they made the right decision of parting ways with him when they did. I think, last year really symbolized that he wasn't interested in kind of fixing this team in the way that they need to be fixed. I think, defensively, they'll still keep this team in some games because their defense was still very good last year. They just unfortunately didn't have the offense to go along with that. So I
Right.
think defensively, they're going to have some good pieces still. I'm very, very concerned about the offensive line that they're providing Drake May with right now. And I'm still concerned about the receiving core, but I'm excited to see how these receivers that they drafted pan out. I think they did a good job in the draft in terms of addressing their needs for sure. But I think, in terms of success for the Patriots this year, I don't think, my expectations for them this year are very low. I don't see
Okay.
them winning a lot of games. I think I was looking at their schedule and I'm giving them about maybe 6 or 7 wins, and that could be
Yep. That's what I had too. I had six
yeah.
wins.
And I think that's a really fair number for them to hit. And I think if they go out there and they're competitive in games, and they don't even necessarily need to be in the playoff conversation, just go out there, have competitive games, maybe take a game from their division opponents along the way and kind of help throw off standings in the division a little bit. That would be a successful season to me if they could hit that 6 to 7 win mark and be like maybe surpassing expectations a little bit in terms of beating some good teams. Then to me that would indicate that they're heading in the right direction in terms of where they want to go with this rebuild. And obviously anything past that, if they win more than 7 games, to me I would be very pleasantly surprised at this
Right.
team and where they're at. I think we need to see Drake May actually perform, because people are already writing him off and saying he's going to be a bust. I'm like, he hasn't played a single snap of Patriots football yet. Like, how could we
Yeah,
even say
pump the brakes
that,
on that. Pump the
that
brakes on
he's going to be a bust? Like, I mean, they needed to draft a quarterback, and they did. And at when they picked, he was the best available quarterback at the time when they picked. So, I'm excited for this new era. I think people need to understand that it is a new era. However, I don't think that they're as bad as people think in terms of they'll go out and they'll win 2 games. Like, I think they actually do have a competitive defense still, which will keep them in some games. And I think they'll win some more games than people might think. So I'm going 6 to 7 wins. If they hit that mark and they are having competitive losses and showing that they have the potential to be able to win some more games, that to me would be a successful first season under this new regime of being able to move forward and say the Patriots are heading in a good direction with this rebuild. If they go out there and they win 2 games this year, then that's going to be tough because then I'll be like, well, there's so much more work to do than we thought
yeah.
here.
Absolutely, no question. Let's talk about these Bruins. You know what? Every time I look at these Boston Bruins, and obviously we have the main sports and then we have the hockey. I'm a huge hockey person, but it feels like the Bruins keep getting up to that hill, but they can't seem to get over that hill. They seem to be a very good team most regular seasons, but they just don't seem to get over the hump. What would take them to get over the hump to be NHL champions again? What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely been incredibly frustrating with them because last year honestly felt like it was supposed to be the year. Last year, they broke regular season records and they were dominating everybody in the regular season. And then to go out the way that they did in the first round against a Florida team that obviously got red hot when they did, but the Bruins had multiple opportunities to close out that series. They were up 3-1 and lost that series. They just could not like win that fourth game of the series. And I
Right.
was like, come on, like, what is going on here? You need to win one more game to move on from this series. And they couldn't do it. And that was heartbreaking because after that season, they lost a couple key players to retirement. After that, in Patrice Bergeron, in David Krejci, guys who had been really the heart and soul of this Bruins team before that. So then they come into this year, and I was like, well, okay, this is good because, we have some talented young players on this team who have the chance to be able to showcase what they can do this year for a team that is still very much in the playoff mix and has a good chance to make the playoffs this year. And then they did. And then they again, couldn't get over that hump. And to me, the biggest problem with them this year was their inability to close out games. They would have leads late in games this year, and then they
Okay.
would blow those late leads. And that's something that I worried about going into the postseason, was because they couldn't consistently maintain late leads, and they'd give up goals late in third periods a lot. And that was frustrating, because that was the problem they had in the postseason last year, and that's ultimately how they lost.
Mhm.
So I had my concerns. I think when it comes to them, they need to figure out the goaltending situation for one. That's something that they need to sharpen, because all season long they were using this two goaltender strategy of like switching back and forth between them. And I
I
get
saw
why,
that.
because
Yeah.
they both were performing well. But then in the
Right.
playoffs, they primarily were using Jeremy Swayman, and they weren't really using Olmark at all. So I think they need to be consistent. And if that means trading Olmark, this off season, and getting some assets that they can bring into this team, and riding with Jeremy Swayman as their goaltender, then so be it. Because the whole two goaltender strategy works fine during the regular season, but then when it comes to the playoffs, things are a little bit different. And I think if you were focusing on one goaltender all season long, then in the postseason, that goaltender would be used to having to be the guy, and it would put them in a better position, I believe, to be able to solidify themselves as actual Stanley Cup contenders. So that's the biggest thing for me this offseason that I'm looking to see them do, and just really shape out and build around their talent, build around the guys who are key pieces on this team, like David Pastrnak, who's like the face of the franchise right now. You need to really get the right pieces around these guys who can
Right.
help you to succeed. And when it comes to, I mean, defensively, they were not a good hockey team this year. And that's something that they need to improve on and tighten up on in the offseason. So maybe they add more pieces defensively to help them next season. But it's definitely frustrating, because it's been a while since they've won it all, and they've had multiple opportunities since then to win it all. I point back to 2019, when they were so close to winning the cup and didn't win it that year either. And there's just so many things with them that they just can't seem to get over that hump. And a lot of people want to pinpoint it to coaching. I think it's way too premature to do that. I mean, this was only Montgomery's second year as the head coach of the team, and they
Yeah.
were a playoff team both years. So I think it's way too soon to say that he needs to lose his job. I think that's just Boston fans being overreactive, because that's just
Of
what we
course.
do. Um,
Of course.
but yeah, I think there's some changes that they need to make from a player standpoint, and they have the talent for sure. It's just a matter of executing under pressure in the big moments, and they seem to just fold when it really matters on the big stage, and that's something
That's
that
what it
needs
seems like to
to
me.
work out. Yeah, it's just they can't, they just forget how to play when they're on the biggest stages, is what it seems like.
And if I'm not mistaken, didn't Florida put them out again this year?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Oh,
did. I mean, they lost that series in 6 games, and they tried to make it competitive. I mean, they came out in game 5 in an elimination game, and they looked good, and they won that game, but I was like, I have no faith that they're going to come back and win this series after going down 3-1.
no, Florida was the better team this particular
Yes.
year, like Boston was a couple years ago against them too. But
And Florida had a
it,
good win last night against the Rangers too, in game 1 of that series. So I think Florida has a good chance to go back to the finals again.
which I was shocked because the Rangers have been dominating the NHL all season long, and everybody who watches hockey knows it's been the Rangers and everybody else,
Yeah,
pretty
it
much
has. It
in
really
the
has.
NHL. So no question about that. Now I got to ask you about the Celtics. Celtics survived Game 1 a couple nights ago. Indiana, they played at Indiana's pace, which I was talking to some buddies offline of mine, and here's what I said, Gabby. I said, listen, for the Celtics to win this series, they're going to have to slow Indiana down. I don't think that they can play at Indiana's pace like that, scoring 125, 130, because they're already without Porzingis, so size is limited. Indiana has the deeper team, but the Boston has better players. So that's why they won, because of Indiana's youth. Indiana turned over the ball too many times and made a lot of bonehead decisions to let Boston back into the game.
Yeah.
What do you think, in your mind? What do you think as far as the Celtics? What do they need to do to win this series? I say they need to slow it down and play more defensive and not getting these high scoring games.
Yeah, it's always interesting with them because they've just been incredibly inconsistent in the playoffs. And this isn't even just a this year thing. This has been an issue the last few years. Um,
Sure.
and with this Tatum and Brown situation, now there's a lot of pressure on them. They have to win now because the questions are going to become, can they actually win when it matters? Because now they have this team around them and the pieces that you feel like can help them win a championship this year. And it seems like they finally have the right pieces in place. And now it's, can they perform? And, both of them hit a really big shot in crunch time the other night. I mean, Jaylen Brown hit the shot that sent it to overtime, and then Tatum hit a
Yeah.
big three in overtime that kind of set the tone for the rest of the overtime period. But there were a lot of people saying, this series was going to be a cakewalk for the Celtics. And I was like, I completely disagree. I think the Pacers
Right.
are talented. They play fast. And, the Celtics did not play a lot of good defense in game one. And that's something that's been an issue in this whole playoff so far is they aren't really bringing the defense with them. And they made some really nice defensive plays the other night. They had some really good defense once they tightened up down the stretch that allowed Indiana to feel more pressure and they weren't able to get as many good shots off.
Right.
So that was something that I liked seeing from them. I mean, Al Horford and Derek White both buckled down on defense towards the end and in the overtime period. But to me, the first thing I noticed about that game was how much they're actually really missing Porzingis now because it wasn't as evident in their first couple series, but now with Horford playing in that role, he was getting absolutely destroyed on the defensive side of the court. And
Yeah, they
that's
picked and
something
rolled him
that,
to death.
yeah, they were. And that's something that is tough because Porzingis still is not able to come back yet. So that to me is the biggest reason why we need Porzingis back now and why he's such an important piece to this team is it's really hard to rely on Horford now with where he's at and his age to be able to play that well for that long. And they're going to continue to mow him over because why would they not? Because it worked for
Right.
them in game one. So I'm
Right.
very concerned about tonight. I think, the Pacers know they can hang and they're going to come out in game two with a sense of urgency because they're going to want to even the series before they go back home. And the Celtics better come out firing because they have lost game two in both of their previous series. And I just hope that they know that this series is not going to be easy. And I think it's going to take buckling down on defense a little bit more and actually finding the right shot. They get into too many situations where they're just trying to toss up threes and hoping they go in. And even when they're not making threes, they're still trying to do that. So it's like, don't be afraid to drive to the hoop, slow things down, and focus on finding the best shot at the time, not just trying to play hero ball and tossing up a three and hoping that it goes in. And that's a habit that I've seen from them way too much that I'm hoping that they can break here because in order to beat this Pacers team, they need to be more willing to play at a slower pace and be able to make the Pacers play their level of basketball. And if the Pacers
Right.
are forced to play Celtics basketball, then they're not winning the series.
Without question. It's been shown in the Pacer games, anybody that's paying attention to NBA basketball, when the Pacers play slow or they don't shoot the ball as efficiently, they don't win. If you look at the last two Pacer games, they've scored a combined total of 258 points. That's an average of 129 points per game. That's Pacer basketball. They've
Yeah, it is.
been in both games where they could have won both of those games. They want to get possessions. They're about possessions and shooting quick and getting up and down the floor. But they have those young bodies to do it. Not to say the Celtics are old, but they're best when they are knocking down threes and defending you. That's what they did in the first two rounds with Miami and Cleveland. They also haven't played a pace like this. It probably took a little bit for them to adjust to a pace because Cleveland and Miami played much slower.
Yes.
So for
Yeah.
them, game one took them a little while. They haven't played the Pacers in the regular season in quite some time, too. People forget about that. So all their
And the
games were,
Celtics had been resting for a while. The Pacers had just come off of a game seven a
they did.
couple days before that. So they were in that playoff atmosphere and it was more fresh to them. Whereas the Celtics were coming back and had been resting for a while and they just were, not really in that mode at that time. So hopefully game one and how close that came was a wake up call for them. Like, keep your identity, like keep what Celtics basketball is, because that's what got them here and that's what got them the number 1 overall seed. Like they have the talent to be able to win the whole thing and they should be able to win the whole thing. They just
Sure.
can't break what they do best. And they weren't doing what they do best in game 1. Lots of turnovers, lots of mistakes that they were making and just sloppy basketball from them, and that's just not Celtics basketball to me. And I truly feel like if they force the Pacers to play their game, the Pacers can't win the series.
Absolutely. And to just last point, Boston Celtics have only played 11 games so far, which is the lowest amount of the 4 teams that's left. So yes, they have been resting quite a bit. No question about that. Last up, before I get into this or that, we got to talk about that Red Sox team. Now, the Red Sox has been a pleasant surprise with their pitching, in my opinion. When I came into the season, I was like, oh boy, I'm a little worried about their starting rotation.
Oh yeah, we all were.
I was definitely a little worried about that. But because you kind of knew the hitting would probably come along, maybe with Devers and Elia, Costas, O'Neill has been a surprise for me. But I knew looking at their starting rotation, I'm like, the Yankees are probably the team to beat in this AL East. Talk to me how surprised you've been about the pitching, and where do you think right now the Red Sox rank among the best in the MLB?
Yeah, going into the season, I had the Orioles winning the division. I still think that. I still think the Orioles are overall the best team, like most complete team in the division. I don't trust the Yankees pitching to maintain what they're doing now
I
all
can respect
season
that.
long.
Yep.
I think adding Juan Soto changed a lot for that team and made them a significantly better offensive team than they were
Without.
last year.
Yep.
I still like Baltimore to win the division. However, it's baseball. Anything can happen, really. Going into the season, I did pick the Red Sox to finish last in the division, and that was primarily because of the starting pitching, because I was very concerned about how that would go, because the one real acquisition they made in the offseason from a starting pitching standpoint is somebody who's missing the entirety of the season in Lucas Giolito because he's injured.
Right.
And they didn't
Right.
really do anything else to add to their rotation, even though they going into this offseason made it seem like they were going to have this huge offseason and they were going to make all these moves, and that just really didn't happen. So I think fans had this expectation that they were going to do more than they did. So they should have just not said that like that, because people would like have not been as disappointed with how this offseason went if the expectation set was different early on. But they've definitely, like you said, from a pitching standpoint, have been a really, very much of a surprise. And I think bringing in Andrew Bailey to work with the pitchers has been a huge difference in that. I think he's been the biggest reason why they are as competitive as they are from a starting pitching standpoint. They're utilizing different pitches. Like everybody in this rotation has gotten better with utilizing more pitches than they used last year and kind of expanding on their usage a little bit. So that's worked wonders for them as a staff overall. And I wasn't concerned about the offense. I mean, I know they can hit. They were able to hit last year. It was literally just their pitching and their defense that wasn't good last year. I still have concern about the defense. Trevor Story being injured for the whole season now is not ideal. From an infield standpoint, he was keeping that defense together. So
Sure.
they made a lot of defensive errors in the outfield too. And so that's something that I'm looking for moving forward from them is, can they clean up the defense? But they're not that far out of a wild card spot right now. And they have all these injuries right now too. That's the other big thing that's impressed me about this Red Sox team is they've had a lot of guys go down with injury, but they're still hanging in and they're still able to hover around that 500 mark. They're a couple games over right now, and they just swept the Tampa Bay Rays, which is huge. Getting these wins against other division opponents is going to be big for them, because that's something last year that they didn't do well with, was beating their own division. So if they can rack up wins against their division, they can be in it. And I've always felt like with baseball, if you
Mm-hmm.
have good pitching, you have a shot to compete, because pitching
Right.
is so important to the success of a baseball team. Like you don't really see a team win the World Series without the strong starting pitching. And I think if the Red Sox continue at this pace with the starting pitching, that's going to give them a shot to win games and be in the playoff conversation. And that's really exciting to me because they aren't healthy yet. So once they start getting healthier, I can only imagine how many more games they might win because of that. So I'm certainly not writing them off. And I
Okay.
think, they're already playing better than people thought they would be playing at this point.
There's no question about that. I definitely had them last as well. I had the Orioles second. I had Toronto third, Tampa fourth. I knew Tampa would probably take a loss, losing some of their pitching as they
Yes.
lost as well. Toronto was hit or miss for me. I just thought Boston, I thought they would be sound defensively coming into but I really did worry about the pitching, but also had a little bit concern with the hitting too. I didn't know because Devers didn't start off great.
No.
He did not start the season off well. And Story did not start off the season well. O'Neal came out the box, hitting the ball really well. But Story going down, Casas being kind of up and down as well. I just thought the Boston team held on because of their pitching. And like you said, if they can still get that consistent effort, they possibly can get a wild card. I also think, though, as a MLB as a whole, it's kind of watered down a little bit because there's a lot of teams hovering around that 500. Like there is a lot of parity in, like there's not like a dominant team. Even you look at the Phillies, right? The Phillies and the Braves and the NL, maybe the Dodgers and the NL. But if you talk about the American League teams, who can you outright say that's a dominant team in the AL right now? Those 15 teams.
Nobody.
Even the Yankees. I can't say the Yankees are dominant.
No, like the Yankees are playing well for sure, but like I'm not looking at them and saying they're significantly better than anybody else.
Right.
Like
It's just up.
Yeah, they're just not. And that's what's exciting to me is that I feel like the AL is wide open right now. So when it comes to those wild card spots down the stretch, I think the Red Sox have as much of a chance as anybody. If they continue pitching at this level that they're pitching at, they definitely have a shot to land one of those spots. And I was talking to somebody recently who said, and this is a good point too, like you just have to get into the playoffs. Like baseball is such a crazy sport in the postseason. Like the best team on paper is not always the one that wins the World Series. And we've seen this with the Dodgers over and over again the last few years when on paper they are a team with how much money they're spending on that team that should be winning the World Series, and that didn't happen. Like, I doubt anybody picked the Diamondbacks to go to the World Series last year. Like, I definitely did not think that they would. And that's the whole thing, too, is it's like, with baseball, you just have to get in, and then really anything could happen. Like, if you're that team that gets hot at the right time, you could win the whole thing. And that's what I love about the postseason for baseball, because it's so unpredictable.
Absolutely. On here with Gabby Hurlbut, locked on Red Sox host, Work Hard, Play Harder podcast. Now we're coming to this or that. So I'm going to throw two things at you, and you choose one of the other, okay? Are you with me, Gabby?
I am.
Okay, here we go. Spades or dominoes?
Dominoes.
Okay. Popeyes or KFC?
KFC.
Okay. Tom Brady or David Ortiz?
You have to do that one to me. That one's too hard. I'm going to go with Ortiz just because I met him in person. So that just gives him a little bit more of a leg up. But they're both GOATs and they're both like faces of Boston sports. So
Sure. But,
that was tough.
Tough questions are asked here on the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast. That's what we do. That's what we do, baby. So here we go. Chicken wing flavors, barbecue or lemon pepper?
Lemon pepper easily.
Okay. Wet or dry?
For
wings.
Oh, for the wings. Oh, wet.
Yes.
Easily
Sorry about
wet.
that. Okay. Sorry about that. And bone in or boneless?
Bone in.
Okay. So you like to get a little messy is what you're saying.
I do.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. That's the kind of friend I need. That's for
I
sure.
like eating them off the bone. I feel like it adds to the experience.
I love it. Okay. Which sport would you rather watch on TV? Basketball or hockey?
Basketball.
Okay. Which sport would you rather play? Badminton or bowling?
I'm bad at both. I would say badminton.
Okay. Okay. At least you admit it, though. At least you admit that you're bad at
I'm
bowling.
so bad at bowling.
Oh, do you need the bumpers? You don't need the bumpers, do you?
Yeah, I use the bumpers.
Oh,
Or
Gabby.
people get mad at me when I use the bumpers when they go with me. They're like, you shouldn't be using bumpers.
Yes, those people have a right, Gabby, to be upset. There's no question. Okay, here we go. All right. Do you like desserts?
Of course.
Okay, so I'm going to throw 4 categories out to you. You need to choose one to get rid of that you'll never eat again. Okay,
Okay.
here we go. First category is cookies. Second category is cakes. Third category is ice cream. The fourth category is candy. Which one are you getting rid of that you'll never eat again?
A cake.
That was easy. Wow.
I don't really like cake that much, to be honest with you.
Okay, okay.
Well,
But
that one was, unless it's ice cream cake. I love ice cream cake.
of course, of course. I have not met a person who doesn't like ice cream cake, including myself.
Yeah.
Absolutely good. Okay. These next 3 questions have to do with concerts you rather attend. Okay. So, which concert would you rather go to? Would you rather go see Kendrick Lamar or Drake?
Drake.
Okay, I like that. That was pretty good. Which concert would you rather go
They're
see?
both good though. They're both really good. They both have great music.
You're right. You're absolutely right. They are both good. Which concert would you rather go see? Would you rather go see Carrie Underwood, or would you rather go see Morgan Wallen?
Carrie Underwood.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Which concert would you rather go see? Okay, would you rather go see Justin Timberlake or Usher?
Usher. That Super Bowl halftime show was awesome.
It was. It was one of the best, no question about it. And I like how definitive you are. That's amazing. I love that.
That would get me excited. That made me so excited to want to see him in person, was that halftime show. That was so awesome.
I love that. I do. Okay. So last 2 for the this or that. Okay. Now, this next one is potato chips. Do you eat potato chips?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Same format. I'm throwing out 4 different ones. You got to get rid of one. Okay. So here we go. Okay. Pringles is 1. Ruffles is 2. Lay's is 3. Doritos is 4. Which one are you getting rid of that you'll never eat again?
They're all so good.
I know it.
I guess Lay's.
I mean, Gabby, was there any other answer to say outside of those? No, come on now. Come on. Rock with me. Rock with your boy now. I'm with you on that. Lay's I would get rid of as well. Okay. Here's the last this or that question. Okay. Which concert would you rather go see in person? Okay. Would you rather go see Luke Bryan or Luke Combs?
I love them both too. I would say Luke Combs.
Okay. Okay. You did pretty good. I like that.
I know somebody who went to see Luke Combs recently and sent me videos from that concert, and it made me jealous. So that could be part of the reason why.
Okay, I love it. I love it though. I love your music taste. Like you're all over the place, which I am too. So I love that. If Gabby wasn't involved in sports media, what career would she have pursued and why?
Oh, geez. Yeah. So when I was younger, for the longest time, I wanted to be an actress, a professional actress, because I used to be involved in like musicals and singing and all of that too. So I wanted to, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional actress that was in movies and stuff like that. So that's probably what I would pursue if I wasn't doing sports media.
Now, hold on. Are you a musical buff like me? Because I love musicals too, Gabby.
I do like musicals a lot. Yes.
Okay, hold on. So I want you to give me, this is a bonus question. I want you to give me a top 4. Give me your top 4 musicals.
Wicked for sure is number 1. That's my favorite musical that I've ever seen live.
Yep.
Number 2, I would say Phantom of the Opera. Which was very, very good. Number 3 that I've actually seen live that I really liked how it was done was Lion King on Broadway. And number 4, for what I've seen on Broadway is actually a recent one that I saw that was an incredible show, which was MJ the Musical.
Okay, I like that. I do. Now I'm gonna give you mine. Okay, so one, I'm no particular order though, but Wicked is definitely up there for me.
Yeah, it's a great show.
If you're a musical person, I don't know how the hell you don't like Wicked. Wicked is one of the best musicals ever made, no
Yeah,
question
it
about
is.
it. I acted in Les Miserables,
Oh,
so
nice.
that's one of my favorite ones. No question. Another one was Hairspray. Hairspray is one of my favorite musicals as
I've
well.
never seen the musical version live.
Oh man, it's so good. And Rent, Rent is mine. I
Oh,
love
that
Rent.
was good.
With an honorable mention of Hamilton. Hamilton is pretty good.
Hamilton's on my list to see.
Okay, you got to see it. Lin Manuel did a hell of a job. Great,
Yeah.
it was awesome. And then Annie too. I love Annie.
Yeah, that's a classic.
That's a classic. I love that. Okay, I'm vibing with you. I love it here. I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so what is some advice that someone gave you that you hold on dearly to?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Because so I've gotten so much of advice like over the years being in the sports industry and just trying to make it. And I would say one of the biggest things that I remember that somebody gave me was no matter what happens, just be you. Because being yourself and being uniquely you is what's going to make people want to follow your content and want to be along for the ride with you. Like, don't try to mimic or be like anybody else that you see on TV. Just do you and do Gabby, because that's what's going to drive people to want to listen to you or interact with you or reach out to you to ask for your opinions on things. Like, you're not going to do anybody else better than you're going to do yourself. So you always want to stay unique and who you are when you're in this field. And that's what I've taken with me for all of this time. And I think that's what's helped me to get to the point I'm at in this podcasting space, is just always doing things how Gabby would do them, not how like another big, TV personality or somebody would do them. I just do it how I do it because that's what makes me unique. And that's what people have to remember, is to just be yourself and you'll stand out.
I love that. I do. I love that advice. We come to the final three questions of the podcast, Gabby. And this next question has to do with your favorite Red Sox memory. I told you mine, which was the Johnny Damon Grand Slam in Game 7 of '04. What was your favorite Red Sox memory that you have?
Yeah, I mean, there have just been so many over the years. I would say that Mother's Day Miracle game is definitely up there, when the Red Sox were down by 5 runs in the bottom of the ninth and they came back and scored 6 runs and won the game. And it's forever since then been known as the Mother's Day Miracle, which was really freaking cool because I was like, yeah, that's another piece of history that's associated with my team. Which is awesome. And then the other one is just obviously when I got to meet David Ortiz in person, just because he was my favorite Red Sox player of all time. So to be able to like meet him and share that with him was a super cool experience for me.
One of my favorite games. I play video games every now and then, not as much as I used to, but MVP Baseball 2004. I love using the Red Sox on that game
Yeah.
on Xbox. I love using that, and that's my Xbox. And then PlayStation, I play MLB The Show, so I still
Yeah.
have both to where I play. I don't know if you play, but I definitely play those for sure. Absolutely, I love those.
I don't play video games, but my fiance does play MLB The Show a lot.
Okay, so
He
shout out to
likes
your
to.
fiance. He's already cool in my book. No question about it. I love it. That's awesome. This next question has to do with where you are, as far as Connecticut, right? I would love to have some recommendations. Like I said, I've never been to Connecticut before. I would love to come see a WNBA game out there for sure. But Fenway Park is a park that I've never been to, and I want to cross that off of my bucket list of parks because I've been to about 13 ballparks so far. So tell me why I should go to Fenway Park, and also give me some recommendations on what to do out there in Connecticut.
Yeah, I've definitely made it a goal of mine to go to all of the ballparks as well. So slowly working my way to that. But the thing about Fenway is there's so much history there, and you seem to really like history. And just going into Fenway and sitting in those seats, and they've never redone anything about that ballpark. It's just so historically what it's always been. It's the same as it's been in the pictures. And to go there and sit in those seats and think about how many players have actually come through and played in that ballpark is just
Sure.
really, really special. And just being able to walk around and see the pictures of all of these guys that played there, like Ted Williams, Carl Yastrzemski, guys that were legends at their sport and played in Boston. It's just like so special to go there and consume all of this. They also have a really cool restaurant that's basically like it's basically in the ballpark. You can sit in the seats in the restaurant and you're overlooking the field, which is super cool. It's like basically right in the outfield. So that's pretty cool. And there's just a lot of stuff to do around the ballpark. You mentioned with the Nashville Stadium, there's a lot of stuff around it. Fenway has its own really cool set of restaurants, bars, things to do around Fenway
Okay.
that makes it really unique and special too from that standpoint. There's just such a fun scene before and after games at Fenway. So there's just a lot that it has going for it as a ballpark. And also it is on the smaller side because again, it's not like a newer ballpark. So you feel like you're more like up close and personal to the action than you feel like you are at other ballparks. And there's not really a bad seat there because wherever you sit, you're going to feel like you're connected to what's going on there. It's a really special place for sure.
Absolutely. What should I do when I touch down in Connecticut? What should I do first?
Well, first of all, you can't go to Connecticut without trying the pizza there. Sally's and Pepe's Pizza are both fantastic, both really good pizza places in Connecticut. Mystic is really cool with just a lot of different things to do there. They have the aquarium, they have the boardwalks, they have a lot of stuff on the water that you could see there. The casinos are actually really cool. Mohegan and Foxwoods, I would say, are worth checking out. They both have a lot of history and a lot of things to do there. There's usually concerts or things going on at those also. So those are pretty cool to be able to check out as well. And, I would say like Connecticut is not really the best place for like going to the beach. If that's something that you want to do, I would say you would want to go to Rhode Island because that's a close drive and the beaches there are really nice. So if you want
Okay.
to do the beach, that's definitely where you go for that. But Connecticut, I would say a Hartford Yard Goats game if you go in the summer is a cool thing to do too. They've done a really, really nice job with that ballpark too. They're the double A affiliate of the Rockies. And so many people go to those games in the summer. So that's a really cool atmosphere to be a part of too. And obviously you mentioned wanting to go to UConn games. I mean, those are worth checking out. Especially basketball games, like I mean, with the fact that they've won the national championship the last 2 years, yay for me, is like makes it such a cool environment to be at one of those games and stores. So if you go during basketball season, it's definitely worth checking it out, especially if they're playing another Big East team because those Big East matchups are just so intense at those games and you feel like you're at a March Madness game even when they're just playing a team in their conference. So it's really cool doing that as well. So, I mean, Connecticut like has some good parts and things to definitely check out. But you definitely want to make sure that there's those specific things that you do.
I love it. I love it. On here with again locked on Red Sox host Gabby Hurlbut on the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast. You know, when I do touch down in Connecticut, I'm gonna have to hit you up. We're gonna have to do
Yes.
something. That's
Yes, for sure.
no question. Maybe even go to my first Red Sox game with you because it will be my
Yeah, right.
first.
That'd be
That'd
fun.
be sure. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
What is something, which is we came to the last question now, what is something that you want to talk about, whether it's yourself or something that you want to advocate about that you haven't talked about yet on this podcast?
That's tough. I think there's not really a lot to be able to describe the feeling of being able to do something you love. and just like making that your job, because I think people take that for granted sometimes. But then the more you listen to people not being happy in their jobs, the more you realize how lucky you actually are to be doing something that you really enjoy. And
Yeah.
that's something that I think I would preach to everybody, regardless of what it is, even if it's not sports that you're passionate about. Find something that truly makes you feel fulfilled and feel passionate, and do what you can to make that be what you're doing to make a living, because your life is going to feel like so much better if what you're doing is just something that you love. And I can't really emphasize enough how important that is in life, to just feel like you're doing what's meant for you and you're on the path you're supposed to be on.
I love that. That is great advice. I never wake up a day and be like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I wake up every day. I have to clock into work, loving what I do because it's something different every single day. And when I do this, talking to different people who are wonderful, just like yourself, it makes it even more special. And it even puts even more emphasis on this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So I really do appreciate you coming on to my podcast, talking a little bit of Boston sports, talking about your upbringing, your father, your grandfather's impact on you in sports, what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's been absolutely amazing. And that's exactly what you are, Gabby. No question about it. So with that being said, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, as we will definitely be in touch.
Yeah, thank you.